All three of you committed murder.
Faith, you need to make sure you wipe your phone. They're not gonna call us murderers for wiping our phones. Murder people, they come for you at 6 a.m, 5 a.m, 6 a.m. You have to be prepared. Your story must not change. We didn't know he was dead.
Your name's Rebecca Moore, isn't it?
Why?
You're Rebecca, right? At this time, Rebecca, listen to me, okay? So, at this time, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder, okay?
On this episode of Urban Crime Stories, we will dive into part 3 of HONEYTRAP murder cases you never heard of. Before we continue, if you are new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for upcoming episodes. The first case is the tragic story of Vishal Gohel. At approximately 10:45 p.m. on Sunday, January 23, 2022, a neighbor of 44-year-old Vishal Gohel noticed something unusual about his flat in Hertfordshire, United Kingdom. The front door was slightly ajar, and the kitchen light was still on, an uncommon sight at that late hour. Concerned by this strange occurrence, the neighbor called out to Gohel, but there was no response. Hesitant yet uneasy, the neighbor decided to step inside and check if everything was all right. However, nothing could have prepared them for the grim discovery awaiting them in the bedroom. As the neighbor entered the flat, they were met with a horrifying sight. Vishal Gohel lay motionless on the bedroom floor. His body was unresponsive, and most disturbingly, gaffer tape was wrapped tightly around the lower part of his face. The shocking scene sent a wave of fear through the neighbor, who immediately grabbed their phone and dialed emergency services. Within minutes, authorities arrived at the scene and secured the area, beginning what would become a complex and deeply unsettling murder investigation. A post-mortem examination later revealed the extent of the injuries Gohel had suffered. The forensic pathologist determined that he had endured severe blunt force trauma to the head, resulting in significant internal bruising on his scalp, eyes, and jaw. Additionally, his voice box had been fractured, injuries consistent with forceful compression of the neck. The findings pointed to a violent and deliberate attack, leaving no doubt that Gohel had been brutally murdered. As detectives combed through the crime scene, they noted signs that the flat had been tidied up, as if someone had attempted to erase evidence of the crime. Yet certain details stood out. Among the missing items were Gohel's iPhone and iWatch, suggesting that robbery might have been a factor in the attack. However, the method of killing and the targeted nature of the assault raised troubling questions. Was this truly a burglary gone wrong, or was there a more personal motive behind the murder? The devastating news of Gohel's death quickly reached his family, sending them into a state of unimaginable grief. Known for their close-knit bond, the Gohel family had always been a source of warmth, joy, and support for one another. Vishal had been an integral part of their lives, and his sudden and violent death left an irreplaceable void. The family struggled to comprehend the reality of losing him in such a horrific manner, their sorrow deepened by the lingering uncertainty surrounding the circumstances of his murder. In the days that followed, emotions ran high as family and friends tried to make sense of the tragedy. Grief quickly gave way to pressing questions. Who would want to harm Vishal Gohel? What motive could someone possibly have for taking his life? The senseless nature of the crime left his loved ones searching for answers, while investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the final moments leading up to his murder. As the investigation unfolded, law enforcement faced a daunting task. With the crime scene meticulously cleaned and few immediate clues left behind, detectives needed to rely on forensic analysis, digital evidence, and any potential witnesses who might have seen or heard something unusual that night. The search for justice had only just begun, and for Vishal Gohel's family, the hope for answers was the only thing keeping them from being consumed by the weight of their loss. Vishal Gohel was born sometime around 1978, given that he was 44 years old at the time of his tragic death. While details about his early life and background are not extensively documented, it is clear that he was a private individual who lived a life away from the public eye. He was not particularly active on social media, preferring to focus on his family and personal life. Despite this, those who knew him remember him as a loving and devoted father, son, and friend, a man whose presence brought warmth and joy to those around him. Gohel was described as an exceptional father, a best friend to his two young sons, and a cherished member of his family. His loved ones recall the deep bond he shared with his children, emphasizing how much they meant to him. The brutality of his murder not only robbed them of their father, but also shattered the sense of security and happiness they had always known. The pain inflicted on his young boys was, as the family put it, indescribable, an irreversible wound that could never truly heal. In the aftermath of his death, the Gohel family released a heartfelt statement, painting a picture of the man they had lost. "We are a very close and joyful family. We did everything together. Vishal was an integral part of our family. Now we have been pitched in a deep pit of grief, doubt, and fear." Their words reflected the immense sorrow they felt and the overwhelming uncertainty that now surrounded them. Losing a loved one to such a horrific crime left them not only mourning, but also desperate for answers. Beyond the grief, the family hoped that Vishal's case would serve as an example, a reminder of the impact such senseless violence has on those left behind. They longed for justice, not just for closure, but to ensure that no other family would have to endure the same unbearable pain. As they grappled with their loss, one question loomed over them. Who was responsible for Vishal Gohel's brutal murder, and why did they want him dead? With so many unanswered questions, the focus inevitably turned to the police investigation. What steps did law enforcement take to uncover the truth? What evidence was found? Was there a clear suspect, or did the case prove more complicated than it initially seemed? Investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the final moments of Vishal's life, searching for any lead that could bring them closer to the truth. A murder investigation was officially launched on Wednesday, January 26, 2022, following the post-mortem examination that confirmed Vishal Gohel had suffered fatal injuries. As law enforcement intensified efforts to uncover the truth, detectives from the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit reassured the public that the investigation was ongoing. Detective Inspector Justine Jenkins, leading the inquiry, expressed sympathy for Gohel's grieving family and friends during this difficult time. She emphasized that specialist officers were providing support to his loved ones and urged the public to respect their privacy. Additionally, Jenkins made a public appeal for information, urging anyone who had seen Vishal between Saturday, January 22nd and Sunday, January 23rd, to come forward, as even the smallest detail could help investigators piece together his final moments. As authorities dug deeper, they uncovered shocking details about the circumstances leading to Vishal's murder. Evidence revealed that he had been lured into a fatal trap under the pretense of a sexual encounter. He had been in contact with 22-year-old Bruce Annan through Craigslist, an online marketplace where various goods and services, including personal meetups, are arranged. That night, Bruce Annan, an apprentice at Coutts Bank, along with a female accomplice, traveled from Barking in a taxi to Hertfordshire at approximately 1 a.m. At 2:25 a.m., two male accomplices arrived in an Audi, setting into motion a premeditated honey trap scheme that had been orchestrated throughout the day. The plan took a deadly turn when Gohel, either unable or unwilling to transfer cash as demanded, was viciously beaten and strangled. CCTV footage from that night provided further insight into Gohel's final hours. He had been seen at a nearby convenience store purchasing alcohol, soft drinks, cigarettes, and condoms while wearing a smartwatch. Investigators also learned that he had borrowed $100 in cash from his mother, who lived nearby, and later withdrew another $100 from a cash machine. The stolen items, including his smartwatch, phone, and the $200 in cash, were later linked to the suspects. 6 individuals were initially charged in connection with the murder, including Tevin Leslie, 23, Sakeen Gordon, 22, Brandon Brown, 23, Yarley Bruce Annan, 22, and Faith Hoppy, 22. However, Tiana Hancock, 20, was acquitted of all charges, including murder, manslaughter, and conspiracy to rob. While the investigation progressed, legal proceedings encountered delays. The initial trial, scheduled for July 2022, was unexpectedly halted due to legal reasons. This setback pushed the proceedings back nearly a year, with a new trial date set for May 15, 2023. After months of waiting, the trial finally resumed, reaching its conclusion in July 2023. The final verdicts and sentences were handed down in December 2023, ensuring that justice was finally served for Vishal Gohel and his grieving family. The court found Bruce Annan of East London guilty of murder after she had already pleaded guilty to conspiracy to rob. Tevin Leslie, 23, from Hurst Street, Brixton, was also convicted of murder and conspiracy to rob. His role in the attack resulted in a minimum sentence of 26 years before parole eligibility. Similarly, Sakeen Gordon, 22, from Ealing, was found guilty of murder by a 10-to-1 majority and conspiracy to rob, receiving a minimum 25-year sentence. Two other accomplices received lesser sentences due to their charges. Brandon Brown, 23, of Rochester, was acquitted of murder, but convicted of manslaughter and conspiracy to rob. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Faith Hoppy, 22, Barking, was also found not guilty of murder, but was convicted of manslaughter and conspiracy to rob, receiving an 8-year sentence. With these convictions, justice had finally been delivered for Vishal Gohel. However, his family's pain remained immeasurable. While the legal system held the perpetrators accountable, the profound loss they endured could never be undone. The case stood as a grim reminder of the dangers of deception and the devastating consequences of a premeditated crime fueled by greed. What are your thoughts on the tragic case of Vishal Gohel and the brutal circumstances surrounding his murder? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Next, the honey trap murder of Saqqad Ali. In the early hours of March 9, 2024, 22-year-old Saqqad Ali was unwinding at a friend's flat in the Netherthorpe area of Sheffield, United Kingdom. He had spent the night playing video games, enjoying a quiet and uneventful evening. However, just after 4 a.m., his phone rang. The call came from an unknown number, but Saqqad chose to answer. On the other end of the line was 25-year-old Rebecca Moore, a known adult entertainer and drug addict. Her voice was persuasive, and she convinced him to leave the comfort of his friend's home and meet her at Ponderosa Park. She lured him in with the promise of an intimate encounter, a proposition that seemed harmless on the surface. But what Saqqad didn't know was that this meeting was a carefully orchestrated setup. As Saqqad made his way to the park, the city was still draped in darkness. The streets were quiet and the air was cold. Ponderosa Park, typically a peaceful spot during the day, had an eerie stillness at that hour. Saqqad likely had no reason to suspect danger as he walked into the open space. But the moment he arrived, the trap was sprung. Emerging from the shadows were two men, Jack Douglas and Barney Griffin. They had been waiting, hidden under the cover of darkness, ready to strike. There was no time for Saqqad to react or escape. Without warning, Barney Griffin launched a brutal attack. Armed with a machete, he struck with relentless force, slashing and stabbing Saqqad over and over again. The sheer violence of the assault was staggering. Saqqad was stabbed 16 times. The attack was swift and merciless, leaving him no chance to defend himself. As the blade tore into him, Saqqad begged for them to stop, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. His attackers showed no hesitation, no remorse. When they were certain their work was done, they turned and fled, leaving him bleeding and alone in the cold darkness of the park. Moments later, a passerby came across the horrifying scene and immediately called emergency services. Paramedics and officers rushed to Ponderosa Park, their flashing lights piercing the darkness. Upon arrival, they found Saqqad lying motionless, his body battered from the relentless assault. They worked frantically to save him, administering emergency medical care in a desperate attempt to keep him alive. But the injuries were too severe. The sheer brutality of the attack had left him with no chance of survival. At 5 a.m., Saqqad was pronounced dead at the scene, his life cut short in a senseless and horrific act of violence. As daylight broke, the park was transformed into an active crime scene. Police cordoned off the area, searching for any evidence that might explain the motive behind the murder. Investigators combed through the scene, documenting every detail, every blood stain, every possible clue. The nature of the attack suggested something deeply personal. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was deliberate, calculated, and executed with chilling precision. But why? What had Sakkad done to deserve such a brutal end? Before we move forward, one question looms large. Who was Sakkad Ali, and what was his connection to Rebecca Moore, Barney Griffin, and Jack Douglas? To understand the motive behind this horrifying crime, we must first examine the backgrounds of those involved. Sakkad Ali was a 24-year-old man who lived in Sheffield, United Kingdom. To those who knew him, he was more than just a name in the headlines. He was a beloved son and a devoted brother. Sakkad had 3 siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister, whom he cherished deeply. His family described him as a kind, caring, and happy young man, always bringing warmth into their home. His mother, Hani, spoke of him with deep affection, saying he was the heart of their family, always smiling and full of life. The news of his brutal murder sent shockwaves through his loved ones, leaving them grappling with a loss they never imagined. While Sakkad appeared to live an ordinary life, his death revealed a hidden truth about his past. Unknown to his family, he had been involved in illegal activities. For years, he had secretly concealed his involvement in drug dealing, a side of his life his loved ones never suspected. It was only after his tragic death that the Ali family learned of his hidden world, adding another layer of heartbreak to their grief. They had always seen him as a kind-hearted young man, unaware of the dangers he had been navigating in secret. On the other hand, Rebecca Moore, the woman who lured Sakkad to his death, lived a vastly different life. At 25 years old, she was an adult entertainer and a drug addict, struggling with the harsh realities of her lifestyle. Her involvement in the events leading to Sakkad's murder painted her as more than just an informant. She was an active participant in the setup that cost him his life. Whether she acted out of fear, desperation, or personal gain remained unclear, but one thing was certain. She played a pivotal role in the deadly trap that led to Sakkad's demise. The 2 men responsible for the attack, Barney Griffin and Jack Douglas, were much younger than Sakkad. Griffin, 18, and Douglas, 17, had been best friends for years growing up together in Sheffield. Their bond had been built on shared experiences, but as they got older, they found themselves drawn into a dangerous lifestyle. Both had been dealing drugs in the city, operating in a criminal underworld where violence and betrayal were commonplace. Their names were not widely known before the murder, but within certain circles, they were figures to be reckoned with. Despite his deep involvement in drug dealing, Barney Griffin had no prior convictions, making him largely invisible to law enforcement. Jack Douglas, on the other hand, had already come onto the police's radar. He had 1 youth caution related to drug dealing, a warning sign that his criminal behavior had started early. Yet despite this, authorities had not foreseen the level of violence he would eventually partake in. The fact that these 2 teenagers orchestrated such a gruesome killing raised alarming questions about the influence of gang culture in drug-related crime in Sheffield. Detective Chief Inspector Ben Wood, the senior investigating officer assigned to the case, led the charge in unraveling the events surrounding Sakkad Ali's brutal murder. From the moment officers arrived at Ponderosa Park, they knew they were dealing with a premeditated and savage attack. Their first priority was to secure the crime scene, ensuring that no potential evidence was disturbed. The park was cordoned off as forensic experts meticulously examined the area, collecting any physical clues that could shed light on the attackers' identities and the sequence of events that led to Sakkad's death. As officers worked through the night, they began gathering witness statements from anyone who had been in the vicinity at the time of the attack. Several individuals reported hearing commotion in the park, while others provided detailed descriptions of the suspects. The information was crucial in shaping the early direction of the investigation. Witnesses recalled key details, including the clothing the attackers had been wearing that night, details that later played a vital role in linking Griffin to the crime. When police later searched his home, they found clothing matching these descriptions, further solidifying his involvement. Forensic evidence quickly became the cornerstone of the case. Investigators discovered traces of blood near Oxford Street, not far from the crime scene. Upon testing, the blood was confirmed to belong to Barney Griffin, placing him near the scene of the murder. This discovery, combined with surveillance footage from nearby security cameras, allowed authorities to track the movements of those involved. The footage captured clear images of Moore, Griffin, and Douglas, all moving in a manner that placed them at the center of the crime. The evidence against them was stacking up rapidly. Despite the mounting case against her, Rebecca Moore attempted to evade capture when officers first approached her. She immediately resorted to deception, lying about her name and age in an attempt to mislead authorities. However, the officer handling the interaction remained composed, waiting for confirmation of her identity. A picture of Moore was sent to the officer's phone, verifying that she was indeed the woman wanted for questioning. Her attempt to escape justice had failed, and she was swiftly taken into custody. As for Griffin and Douglas, they quickly realized that the police were closing in. Their movements had been traced, the forensic evidence was irrefutable, and law enforcement was tightening the net around them. Rather than attempting to flee, they made the calculated decision to surrender. On the morning of Tuesday, March 12th, just 3 days after the murder, both Griffin and Douglas walked into a police station and handed themselves in. Their decision to turn themselves in did little to change the overwhelming case against them. With all three suspects in custody, the final pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. But while their arrest marked a turning point in the investigation, one critical question remained. What had truly motivated them to take Sakkad's life? As investigators continued to piece together the events leading up to Sakkad Ali's murder, they uncovered the motive behind the brutal attack. It became clear that Griffin and Douglas had been drawn into the dangerous world of drug dealing, either through recruitment or personal choice. Once involved, they saw Sakkad as a threat, someone who was selling drugs in what they considered their territory. Rather than resolving their dispute through less violent means, they made a deadly decision: to eliminate him entirely. Their actions reflected the harsh reality of drug-related violence, where disputes were often settled with bloodshed rather than words. Rebecca Moore's role in the crime also became more evident as the investigation progressed. While she was not one of the individuals who physically attacked Sakkad, she played a crucial role in luring him to Ponderosa Park under false pretenses. Investigators determined that she had knowingly set the trap, enticing Sakkad with the promise of an intimate encounter, only for him to be ambushed by Griffin and Douglas. Her involvement was not incidental, it was deliberate. She had facilitated the murder, ensuring that Sakkad was in the right place at the right time for the attack to occur. As the case moved to trial, the prosecution presented the overwhelming evidence against all three defendants. Witness testimonies, forensic findings, and security footage painted a clear picture of the events leading up to Sakkad's murder. Moore, Griffin, and Douglas were all charged with murder. While Griffin and Douglas admitted their roles, Moore maintained her innocence, forcing the prosecution to prove her culpability in court. After weeks of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. All three were found guilty of murder, with Moore's conviction coming after a full trial. On November 28, 2024, the sentencing hearing took place, where Judge Jeremy Richardson delivered his final ruling. He condemned the senseless nature of the crime and the dangers posed by drug-related violence, particularly among young people. His remarks highlighted the devastating consequences of carrying weapons and engaging in territorial disputes over drug sales. In his sentencing, he handed down life sentences to all three individuals, ensuring that justice was served for Sakkad Ali. Griffin, who had carried out the majority of the attack, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years before being eligible for parole. Douglas, his accomplice, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 15 years. Moore, despite not wielding a weapon, was held accountable for her role in luring Sakkad to his death. She was also sentenced to life, with a minimum term of 15 years before she could apply for parole. The sentencing sent a strong message that involvement in violent crime, whether direct or indirect, would not go unpunished. What are your thoughts on the brutal murder of Sakkad Ali? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. The last case we will dive into is the tragic story of Adrian Murphy. In June 2019, the shocking discovery of Irish dancer Adrian Murphy's lifeless body in a Battersea flat sent ripples through the quiet South London community. What initially appeared to be a tragic mystery unraveled into a chilling tale of deceit, poison, and murder. Investigators uncovered a dark partnership between Joel Osei and Diana Christea, who targeted victims through social networking apps, drugged them with the lethal devil's breath, and plundered their belongings. As detectives pieced together the evidence, their ruthless scheme and its devastating consequences exposed the horrifying depths of their calculated crimes. Joel Osei, born in 1994, is a figure shrouded in mystery, with little information publicly available about his early years or upbringing. By the time he reached the age of 25, however, he had already embarked on a path of calculated criminality. Osei, alongside his 19-year-old former partner, Diana Christea, formed a sinister duo that preyed on unsuspecting individuals in North London. Their crimes revolved around a deceptive scheme that relied on using Grindr, a popular social networking app, to befriend men. What began as seemingly innocent interactions quickly escalated into a carefully orchestrated plan to exploit and rob their victims. Using fake profiles on Grindr, Osei targeted men and arranged meetings under false pretenses. Once he gained the trust of his victims, he carried out his scheme with chilling precision. During these encounters, Osei administered scopolamine, a powerful and dangerous drug known as the devil's breath. This drug is infamous for its ability to render victims unconscious and disoriented, leaving them vulnerable to manipulation. Under the influence of scopolamine, the victims were unable to resist or even comprehend the theft of their possessions. Osei took full advantage of this, stealing valuables ranging from electronics and cash to personal belongings. Diana Christea played a crucial role in this operation, acting as Osei's accomplice and facilitator. After Osei robbed the victims, he handed the stolen items to Christea, who handled the next phase of their criminal enterprise. Her primary responsibility was selling the stolen goods online, turning their ill-gotten gains into financial profit. This division of labor underscored the calculated and organized nature of their partnership, with both individuals playing specific roles to ensure the success of their scheme. The crimes committed by Osei and Christea were not just about theft, they were acts of profound betrayal and exploitation. By using Grindr to establish a false sense of connection, Osei and Christea manipulated their victims into a position of vulnerability. The use of scopolamine added a particularly insidious element to their actions, as it deprived the victims of their ability to protect themselves, leaving them at the mercy of their attackers. The psychological and emotional trauma endured by the victims extended far beyond the loss of their possessions. Joel Osei and Diana Christea's criminal activities had gone unnoticed by law enforcement until June 2019, when a tragic event brought their schemes into sharp focus. Adrian Murphy, a 43-year-old Irish dancer, was found dead on June 4, 2019, at a flat on Lombard Road in South London, where he had been staying. Investigators later determined that Adrian had likely died on June 1st. His unexpected death triggered a meticulous and wide-ranging investigation, uncovering a web of deceit and criminality orchestrated by Osei and Christea. A post-mortem examination provided critical insights into Adrian's death. While no signs of defensive injuries, restraint, or sexual activity were found, toxicology tests revealed alarmingly high levels of scopolamine in his system, a drug known for its ability to incapacitate victims. The pathologist concluded that the scopolamine was directly responsible for his death. Adding to the evidence, investigators discovered traces of the drug inside an empty drink can in the flat. Surveillance footage from the building further implicated Joel Osei. At 10:20 p.m. on June 1st, CCTV captured him exiting an elevator and heading toward Adrian's flat. A few hours later, at 12:05 a.m. on June 2nd, he was seen leaving the building carrying a bag, later confirmed to be filled with items stolen from Adrian. As detectives delved deeper, they uncovered a trove of digital evidence that exposed the coordination between Osei and Christea. While Osei was at the South London flat with Adrian, he engaged in 23 separate calls and messages with Christea, demonstrating her active involvement in the scheme. After leaving the flat, Osei met Christea and handed over stolen items, including laptops, phones, a designer bag, a wallet, clothes, and bank cards. This partnership, marked by meticulous planning and execution, showcased their organized approach to targeting and exploiting their victims. On June 2, 2019, Christea wasted no time in monetizing the stolen goods. Using her phone, she took photographs of the items and posted them online for sale. The pair also exploited Adrian's financial resources by using one of his bank cards to make nearly $3,000 worth of purchases on computer software. Their brazen actions didn't stop there. That same day, they created a PayPal account in Adrian's name, but linked it to Christea's former address in Tottenham. In an even more audacious move, they attempted to purchase $80,000 worth of luxury goods from a diamond jeweler in New York, marking an escalation in the scale of their crimes. Adrian Murphy's death became the catalyst for exposing the true extent of Osei and Christea's predatory behavior. Their callous exploitation of Adrian, both during his life and after his death, revealed the depth of their greed and disregard for human life. This case not only highlighted the calculated and methodical nature of their operations, but also brought their reign of deceit and manipulation to an end. Through diligent investigative work, law enforcement began piecing together the events that would ultimately lead to their capture and prosecution. As the investigation into Adrian Murphy's death deepened, detectives uncovered a chilling connection to another incident that had occurred just days earlier, on May 30th, 2019, in East London. In this case, a 40-year-old man had fallen victim to Joel Osei's deceitful schemes. The victim had invited Osei to his flat after the two had connected on a social networking app. What began as a seemingly innocent meeting took a sinister turn when the victim suddenly became incapacitated, a hallmark of Osei's calculated use of scopolamine. Neighbors later found the victim conscious but entirely unresponsive, prompting them to seek medical assistance. Police forensic analysis played a crucial role in unraveling the events of that day. A sample of the victim's hair revealed high levels of scopolamine, confirming that Osei had drugged him to render him defenseless. The drug's debilitating effects left the victim unable to protect himself or his property. When he returned home from the hospital, the grim reality of the crime became evident. His flat had been ransacked during his unconscious state. Items stolen included laptops, mobile phones, a wallet, and cash, mirroring the pattern of theft seen in Adrian Murphy's case. Further investigative efforts revealed the involvement of Diana Christea, Osei's accomplice and co-conspirator. Phone records showed that Osei maintained contact with Christea throughout the East London incident. Their communication underscored her active role in facilitating the crimes. CCTV footage from the area surrounding the victim's flat provided additional evidence. Osei was captured at approximately 3 p.m. on the day of the incident, walking along a nearby road and carrying bags believed to contain the stolen property. His movements were methodical, and the footage offered a glimpse into the precision with which he executed his crimes. After leaving the scene, Osei rendezvoused with Christea, and the stolen items were quickly monetized. The pair traveled to a shop in Tottenham, where they used the victim's bank card to make several purchases. This brazen misuse of their victim's financial resources was a hallmark of their operations, reflecting a complete disregard for the consequences of their actions. A subsequent search of Christea's address uncovered a trove of stolen goods from the East London flat. Officers also found photographs of the items on Christea's phone, some of which had already been sold online. This discovery provided incontrovertible evidence of her involvement in the crime. In an unexpected and dramatic twist during the trial, the jury was presented with shocking revelations about the actions of Diana Christea and Joel Osei. On June 19, 2019, Christea made a 999 emergency call, alleging that Osei had killed Adrian Murphy by drugging him and subsequently stealing his personal belongings. Her statement highlighted the cracks in their partnership as she sought to implicate Osei directly in Adrian's death. Adding to the courtroom drama, Osei was discovered passing notes to Christea while they sat in the dock, further underscoring their deeply intertwined but fractious relationship. Under mounting pressure during cross-examination, Osei made a partial confession, pleading guilty to several of the charges against him. However, the court ultimately found him guilty on multiple counts at Croydon Crown Court on October 23, 2020. His convictions included murder, administering a poison or noxious substance, manslaughter, administering poison with intent to injure, aggrieve, as well as 2 counts of theft and 8 counts of fraud. Christea was convicted of the same charges, including selling stolen goods. In January 2021, Joel Osei was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 32 years for the murder of Adrian Murphy. He also received a concurrent 5-year jail term for administering poison to endanger the life of the surviving victim in the East London case. No additional penalties were imposed for the theft and fraud charges, as the sentences were designed to reflect the gravity of his primary offenses. The judgment served as a definitive end to Osei's calculated and deadly spree, bringing some measure of justice for the victims and their families. 2 months later, in March 2021, Diana Cristea faced her sentencing. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years for her role in Adrian Murphy's murder. Additionally, she received a 30-month concurrent detention sentence for her involvement in poisoning the surviving victim from East London. Similar to Osei, no separate penalties were issued for her fraud and theft convictions. Cristea's sentencing marked the conclusion of her involvement in the criminal saga, reflecting the court's recognition of her significant role in the crimes. Thank you for watching this episode until the end. Please share your thoughts about these cases in the comments below. Remember, if you are new to the channel, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for upcoming episodes. Your support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you on Urban Crime Stories.